Good morning, everybody. Lee Brower here, and welcome to this week's edition of Meaningful Monday. I am grateful to be here, and I am glad to be here with you. Courage. Courage is the ability to carry out a worthwhile commitment once the emotion of making that commitment has passed. Last week, we all made commitments, or many of you did. I know I did, but I challenged you to make a commitment. Do you remember what it was? We talked about the subconscious mind. We talked about how 95% of everything that happens in the brain happens below the conscious level. And it's like rich soil. And we put seeds into that soil. And if you put a bad seed in, that'll kill you, and you put a good seed in that'll nourish you, the soil doesn't care. It makes no decisions. It feeds both seeds equally. And that's the same way it is with the thoughts that we give it. But the brain, the subconscious brain, cannot ignore a question. And if we want to empower that subconscious brain to work with us 24/7, if we want to move into that spirit of abundance and of gratitude rather than that spirit of scarcity, then we can move into it through questions, and we call those empowering questions. And if we just ask the right questions to empower our subconscious mind to work for us, then it'll start working for us 24/7 and giving us answers. So the challenge question, the empowering question for last week was, can I be the answer to someone's prayer today? And the commitment was to write it down and repeat it 3 times each morning. Let your subconscious have it. Let it go. Don't try to answer it, and off it goes. Can I share with you my first 2 days? Because at the end of the 2 days, I said, whoa, what have I done? But at the end, in day 1, I went to the gym a little bit later than I normally do. And I was just finishing a workout. And as I was leaving, a young man in his late 20s called out to me, walked over, and he saw this shirt. This was the shirt that I was wearing, this one right here. And it says Wacky on it. And he looked at that shirt and he says, are you affiliated with Wacky? And I said, well, yes. And he says, Warriors Against Cancer and Kids and Young Adults? I said, yes. And he said, do you know Nick Rate? And I said, of course I know Nick Rate. He's my bonus son. Now, in our family, we don't use the word step. And I'm blessed with amazing children, including 3 bonus children. And how many of you those of you that have stepchildren know how much you can still love them, but I was very blessed to know all 3 of my stepchildren from the day they were born. All right, bonus children, excuse me. All right, so I said, yes, of course I know Nick. And he says, oh, what a great guy. What a great guy. He says, do you realize how many people's lives he's impacted, even to this day? And I said, probably not. I know that he's impacted many. He said, my brother's his age, and I'm a year older. We've been to your home. And we would both look at Nick and say, he's the kind of person that we want to be. He's the kind of person that likes everybody. He's the kind of person that attracts everything to him. And even to this day, his influence continues to influence me and influence others. Now, I was humbled by that. And as we continued to talk, he confessed to me that he had a desire to make a difference in this world, but he never thought that he'd be able to. Not like Nick. Now, this is a well-educated young man, a well-disciplined young man that is struggling in life a little bit with purpose. And as we got talking, we talked about the difference between ensu and pursue. When you pursue something, it's difficult to get it. But when you live your life right, and then let it ensu, good things can happen. And as I talked to him, I said, you know, we all throw rocks into the pond of life, and they send out ripples, and we may not know where they go. I said, young man, you've just thrown a rock into the pond of life, and you've influenced me in a very positive way today. And you know what? I'm going to share your story. And that story is going to go out, and you're never going to know where it goes. But that story, the message of that story is that you don't know where these messages go. And this message about Nick and about being able to live a positive life is going to be able to flow out from here. And you will not know where those go. So you made a difference today. We carried on our conversation for some 45 minutes or an hour, and I let him go. And now jogging back home, I live about about a mile and a quarter from where I work out. So I'm jogging back home, and as I round the corner, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, did I just have an answer to somebody's prayer today? Or was he the answer to my prayer today? That's day 1. Day 2, same route running home. I didn't go to the gym, but I've been out running. And as I'm coming around the corner, literally, first of all, I run into my wife, Lori. She stops over and says, "You want to ride home?" And I said, "Well, maybe." She said, "Oh, no, you're too stinky." And how she went. And so then as I'm coming around the last corner, a car comes driving up. So imagine I'm turning left up to go to the street, about a block up the street. And as I'm turning left, here comes a car and blocks this kind of street, but comes right at me. And I stop and look at the car, and an elderly lady's driving, and now she's pointing perpendicular to the curb. And I said, "Can I help you?" And she said, "Oh, please, yes." I said, "Well," so she rolled down her window. I said, "What's wrong?" And she said, "Well, my son has been driving my car, and I've had this car for 6 years, and I've always had it on the same radio station. And I don't know what he did to my radio, but I can't find that station. Can you help me?" And I'm like, "Okay." And I looked in, and I could tell it's a little bit of a complicated radio. And I said, "I may have to come over and sit down there to help you." And I said, "I'm pretty stinky." I said, "My wife wouldn't even let me in the car." And she says, "Oh, please, please." But I came in, kind of leaned in and put my hand in and worked on it for a little while. Eventually got it figured out. She was so grateful because she had to drive for about an hour, and she didn't want to drive without listening to her favorite news radio station. And I thought to myself, okay, am I going to keep asking this day after day and see what happens? But I promise you, if you will you may not see it in the moment. You may not see those ripples. But if you put it out there, can I be the answer to somebody's prayer today? I believe that you will be the answer to somebody's prayer, whether you know it or not. Because you will attract those kinds of opportunities to you. Now, I'm going to suggest this. Let's keep this question going for a while. Maybe throughout the month of July. And I'll come back with little anecdotes and stories. And would you be willing, if you have any experiences, please, please, please send them to me. You can reply to the email you receive this on. If you're on Facebook, you can respond, or you can email me at lee@leebrower, BROWER.com. Please, I would love to catch it. Imagine a whole world asking this question. Imagine 1,000 people asking this question. Imagine 10,000 or 100,000 people asking this question or ones like it, the difference that it'll make in the world. Let's make a difference. Have a meaningful week. Ask yourself if you're willing to have the courage to make a commitment, willing to carry out that commitment once the emotion of making it is past. Let's be courageous. I'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.